Concerns around security and the taxpayer cost of Chinese college students. An excellent story about 53 million eggs to be donated. DOGE ending, but where are the rebates? And Michigan's budget passes. Welcome to the States, powered by the Center Square. It's Monday, July 6th, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Well, as the country continues the celebration of America's 250th birthday with the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, taxpayers are now seeing new reports of fraud losses in the hundreds of billions annually. The Biden administration called the government's only estimate of annual fraud losses not plausible. Now, the Trump administration says fraud costs taxpayers hundreds of billions annually. The Center Square reporter Brett Rowland reports the U.S. Government Accountability Office estimated in April 2024 the federal government loses between $233 billion and $521 billion annually to fraud. It was the first and only government-wide estimate of its kind, representing 3% to 7% of average federal obligations. Now, the estimated losses work out to between $1,400 to $3,200 for each of the nation's estimated 162.8 million individual income tax filers, according to IRS data. Now, the wide range reflects different risks over the 5-year period the estimate covers. The Biden administration rejected the estimate. Jason Miller, then the deputy director for management at the Office of Management and Budget, said in April 2024 that the estimate was not plausible and would, quote, create confusion and promote misleading generalizations that have no factual connection to specific federal programs. The Trump administration is taking a different view. Brett reports an OMB spokesman telling the Center Square that while it's hard to know the exact figure, annual losses to fraud have been enormous, certainly numbering in the hundreds of billions. But none of the GAO's 3 recommendations has been fully implemented. As of March of this year, OMB had no updates on 2 recommendations aimed at improving fraud-related data collection. A 3rd recommendation, directed at the Treasury Department, also remains open. We talked to the Center Square's Brett Rowland late last week about other taxpayer issues, like the end of the Department of Government Efficiency. That's coming up. Stay tuned for that. Now, a report raising some alarms.
Just to kind of highlight the different ways and untraditional ways in which they're pursuing this plan, Director Ray, let me ask you, what in your view could you say in this setting is the counterintelligence risk posed to U.S. national security from Chinese students, particularly those in advanced programs in the sciences and mathematics?
I think in this setting, I would just say that the use of non-traditional collectors, especially in the academic setting, whether it's professors, scientists, students, we see in almost every field office that the FBI has around the country. It's not just in major cities; it's in small ones as well. It's across basically every discipline, and I think the level of naivete on the part of the academic sector about this creates its own issues. They're exploiting the very open research and development environment that we have, which we all revere, but they're taking advantage of it. So one of the things we're trying to do is view the China threat as not just a whole of government threat, but a whole of society threat on their end. And I think it's going to take a whole of society response by us. So it's not just the intelligence community, but it's raising awareness within our academic sector, within our private sector as part of the defense.
Well, in that vein, last week I wrote a letter to 5 higher education institutions in Florida about the Confucius Institutes, which are funded by Chinese government dollars at U.S. schools.
That's former FBI Director Christopher Wray answering former U.S. Senator Marco Rubio's questions about the threat China poses by being in schools in a recent report raising alarms about security and the taxpayer funding of foreign students, especially from China. Strategy Risks reports Missouri State University's MBA pipeline for Chinese state-owned enterprise executives, government officials, and defense contractors may have received tens of millions of dollars in U.S. taxpayer support while training individuals who later assumed senior positions in China's defense industries, surveillance technology sector, and state-owned enterprises. Now, joining us to break that report down is Sam Shulman. He's Director of Research at Strategy Risks. Sam, thanks for taking time with us. Let's unpack this report. We heard a little bit of Christopher Wray answering the question from Marco Rubio from back in 2018. But why does this issue matter?
Well, this matters because our report raises questions about possible oversight and transparency in international university partnerships. It argues that a publicly funded university, MSU, trained executives who later held positions in Chinese state-owned enterprises, which included companies in China's defense sectors. So these are important issues and questions for policymakers and that the public may want to reasonably examine.
Let's get into a little of the specifics here, because your guys' report's pretty thorough. Tons of footnotes spanning all around the globe. But how long was this program operating, and where was this program operating? What was your guys' magnifying glass on?
Right. So it was operating in the U.S. at Missouri State and has been running since around 2001. So over 20 years.
So over 20 years, how many different students were you able to glean may have gone through these types of programs?
We gleaned over, our estimate is over 1,500 students.
Over 1,500 Chinese students. What kinds of graduates did the program ultimately produce?
Various kinds, but what the report highlights is that graduates went on to leadership roles at these state-owned enterprises, various Chinese government organizations, including companies in aerospace, defense, AI, and other strategic industries. And we cite a few examples, like AVIC was one that we mainly focused on, which is a Chinese state-owned aerospace and defense conglomerate. It's been sanctioned by the US since, I believe, 2020, and iFlytek, which is an AI and speech recognition company known for voice technology, but also for surveillance technology. And we highlight that they had been involved in surveilling the Uyghur population in Western China, which has been reported to be persecuted over many years at this point.
Sam, talk a little bit about the admittance here. You talked to 1,500 different students over the span of 20 years or so. Who was controlling the admittance of these students? What kinds of qualifications and criteria did you guys find out that they had to meet?
That's a great question. And so while MSU would have had the final say, and they're actually the ones admitting the students, our report highlights that Chinese partner institutions really controlled candidate selection and the makeup of each cohort. And in some cases, participants also received admissions accommodations, which included being able to bypass the TOEFL, which is an English language exam, and the GMAT, which is another standard exam for business school admissions.
There's a lot of international students that come to the United States, right? I mean, the United States is kind of a bastion of freedom and liberty and these types of things. Where else is this happening? And is it just Chinese students to be concerned with, or are there other countries that might be somehow gaming this system?
I don't think this is a unique case. And we're working on a few others within the US, which I'd be able to speak more about probably at a later date, but it's not restricted only to MSU. And on the donation side, last year, we released a report on Harvard and the CCP's influence there. So this appears not to be a unique case, and I wouldn't be surprised if it applies in other countries too.
All right, let's talk about the taxpayer element of this. How much exactly were you able to find that taxpayers in the United States were paying for this pipeline?
That's a fantastic question. So in our report, we provide our best estimate for what that number could look like, but we don't have actual like financial documents from MSU to fully confirm this. And that's actually something we're really excited about. Since we've released this report, one of the things we're hoping to get from MSU is a little more clarity on their accounting. So, yeah.
But some of the projected taxpayer costs from your report It could be, again, looking to get that clarification, but $27,000 per student with 1,500 students enrolled by 2018. And your report also highlights that's about $40 million. And then you have an additional 500 that were enrolled through 2024, and that just adds to that overall cost. $54 million possible taxpayer funds here that helped facilitate this pipeline.
That's right. That's right. That is our estimated total based on the publicly available information we were able to comb over. But at the same time, we would need to see like a full financial audit. And one thing we'd love to see is for MSU to be able to fully disclose where the money was coming from, how it was handled. And if it wasn't taxpayer money, was it just from the university? Those are important questions.
You know, in the opening clip with former Senator Rubio talking about Confucius centers and the influence that the Chinese Communist Party could be putting on to universities, where does this program stand today? Is this something that Congress needs to delve deeper into?
Well, today it appears that the program's still up and running. While this was not like the main focus of the report, we also do highlight that MSU has a partnership with Liaoning Normal University in China, and that they very recently, over the past few months, signed an agreement with the university to extend the program a further 15 years. So they're certainly still in touch. I think we also highlighted an example of a job posting from last year or the year before for a China program specialist at MSU. So it appears that these programs are still ongoing and active.
Again, $27,000 possible taxpayer cost per student for 1,500 students that have been enrolled through 2018, about 500 more through 2024. Sam, encapsulate this again. Why is this important? Why should people care about this?
Well, it ranges from people interested in geopolitics to those concerned about the education system in the United States. You touched on this before. Of course, it's so great that the U.S. has such a wonderful education system that people come from all over the world to attend some of the best institutions. But at the same time, these universities need to also consider where their students end up, what their students are learning, and where they're applying that knowledge in the future. So I think this actually has appeal to quite a broad audience.
I would imagine some members of Congress also are going to be taking interest in your report and future reports. Sam Shulman, Director of Research at Strategy Risks. Greatly appreciate your time, and we'll check back in with you on future reports. We'll be right back here with more from the States. If you live in one of 17 states, your charitable food pantries, they're in line to share more than 53 million eggs after the U.S. Department of Justice announced a pending settlement with 3 major egg producers, alleging they manipulated egg prices. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. Well, inflation's definitely taken its toll. There's no question things have increased in price, and you saw a lot of that during the peak of COVID, following various different types of government programs with taxpayer subsidies, and prices continued to increase overall 9+%. And while the peak of COVID inflation is still somewhat fresh in everyone's minds as they go to the store each and every day, there's still other things that are inflated, possibly pushing that price higher. including gas prices. AAA places today's average at $3.79, and while that's down from last month, it's up from last year. Again, elevated energy prices could push inflation higher, but inflation was already an issue heading into last year and heading into this year. Now, on April 16th of this year, the issue of egg prices was pretty pronounced. U.S. Representative Andy Harris, during a House committee hearing with the U.S. Department of Agriculture as the witness and testifying, well, he laid out the cost of eggs then and now.
As we recall, at the end of the Biden administration, egg prices were over $5 a dozen. Today, egg prices were half that amount, and where I shop, it's $1.66 a dozen.
That's right.
Overall, according to USDA, food prices increased a staggering 9.9% in a single year under the Biden administration, the fastest increase since 1979. The Trump administration has successfully prioritized efforts to tame food inflation to be in line with historical norms. Yet a new baseline of higher food prices was set by the previous administration that continues to plague consumers, and it will take time to overcome.
Now, that time continues to tick on as consumers see that price of eggs fluctuating. I've seen egg prices as high as $8 for a dozen. Lately, I've seen egg prices as low as $2 a dozen. But during that hearing back in April, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins, she said that the agency's continuing to spend big to help combat one particular nuisance for egg producers.
We announced about a year ago our billion-dollar plan to combat avian flu and bring egg prices down. That plan has worked. Based on and compared to this time last year, HPAI cases are down 61% across the country. For those of you that are representing poultry in your states, that's a really, really big number. The number of birds is down 46%. And of course, the cost of eggs, the wholesale cost of eggs is down 90%, retail closer to 46%.
Now, inflation may not have been the only thing impacting the price. Back in April 2026, 2026, a House committee marking up an ag bill, also dealing with rural developments and the Food and Drug Administration. You had Arkansas U.S. Representative Steve Womack raising concerns about regulations on egg producers. Again, this is back in April of this year.
Now, currently, due to an FDA rule finalized in 2009, commonly known as the shell egg rule, these surplus broiler eggs must be discarded due to the lack of immediate refrigeration. Now, just think about that. Hundreds of millions of eggs discarded as a result of this rule. It completely disregards the difference between table eggs, which are raw products that need refrigeration, and breaker eggs, which are pasteurized and safe for mixing. Because of this misguided rule, chicken farmers throw away nearly 400 million perfectly good eggs each year. To add insult to injury, table eggs that test positive for salmonella are allowed to be sent to a breaker facility to be pasteurized and then mixed into these grocery products. Yet surplus broiler eggs that are salmonella negative are not allowed to be sold to breakers just because they weren't refrigerated. This double standard didn't make sense when it was implemented, and it doesn't make sense now.
You're learning a lot about eggs, more so than you probably wanted to, but was there more to this story about the price of eggs, more so than inflation or government regulation? Were the prices of eggs being exaggerated or manipulated behind the scenes? Lost in the shuffle heading into the Independence Day holiday weekend may have been the story. The U.S. Department of Justice announced a settlement in a case that they brought against several egg producers for allegedly unlawfully coordinating the manipulation of egg prices. This came out just before the weekend, with the DOJ saying they filed in U.S. District Court in Iowa the complaint that alleged Cal-Maine, Hickman's, and Fursova alleged that they coordinated to artificially inflate the daily quotation of the Erner Berry publications. Now, what is that? Well, it's a market report company that looks at different types of egg prices in grocery stores, restaurants, and others, and how they pay for eggs nationwide. Now, every year, there's billions of eggs that are sold with prices based on the particular price quotations that this publication puts out. Now, the complaint from the DOJ that alleges defendants conspired to inflate that price quotation by agreeing to submit a large number of bids, caused multiple defendants to bid in order to signal the prices that a diverse set of market participants needed to buy eggs. They submitted a large number of bids in the hours leading up to the publication, and submitting bids that were unlikely to lead to executed trades. Plus, they would execute trades at premium prices. So the DOJ's complaints also alleged eggs prices, they dropped significantly from their peak after the defendants learned of the department's investigation and were instructed to preserve documents way back in March of 2025. Now, Associate Attorney General Stanley Woodward said no product more quintessential represents affordability than the Americans paying for eggs. These actions prove this department's continued commitment to protecting competition and providing real relief for everyday Americans' pocketbooks. Now, this is just a proposed settlement after the DOJ filed that lawsuit in federal court. And if the settlement is approved by the courts, then it'll prohibit defendants from communicating with competitors regarding bidding and strategies and prices, timing, and a variety of other factors. It'll prohibit them from communicating together regarding certain information about bids, prices, and other things, agreeing with competitors on the number of pricing or other terms for these different types of bids. And it would also prohibit communicating with competitors regarding bids on transactions that are not based on legitimate business needs. Further, this particular settlement continues to give some relief with the prospect of getting settled by the courts and 53 million eggs that are going to be donated by these three different providers. Hickman's will be providing 3 million eggs, and adding on to that, 250,000, so 3.25 million eggs to different food banks. Versova, they're going to be donating 20 million eggs to food banks. And Cal Maine, they are going to be providing 30 million eggs to food banks all across the country. But it's only in these 17 states. You've got Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Hawaii, Iowa, Maryland, Minnesota, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Utah, Vermont, and Wisconsin. They all joined the DOJ in that complaint against these egg producers. It's interesting to hear more about eggs as we continue to wake up each and every morning. I have at least a couple of eggs, and I imagine that food banks on the other end of that $53 million egg donation, rather 53 million eggs, not dollars, it's an excellent and exactly what they need. It's existential time with inflation, other different egg puns I can work in here about exaggerated prices. So I had to get some of those puns in there. All right, sorry, had to. We'll be right back with more from the States.
There's going to be some documentation of what took place.
I mean, we have no plans to do kind of a closing DOGE report.
The Department of Government Efficiency will not issue a closing report when it officially ended July 4th. Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vogt saying the $5,000 rebate checks that was once floated for taxpayers also never came. Welcome back to the States. In February 2025, President Donald Trump and then advisor Elon Musk, they floated sending taxpayers 20% of DOGE's savings, an idea that originated from another supporter. Now, there were some big numbers that were thrown around, including rebates that were supposed to go to taxpayers. Joining us to discuss this and whether those efforts were successful and whether there were failures is the Center Square's Brett Rowland. Brett, thanks for taking time with us. What kinds of savings does this initiative tout?
So DOGE's website, which you have to remember hasn't been updated since January 1st, their savings claims specifically, they tout $215 billion in savings. But there's no real verification for that, so it's hard to really quantify beyond what Congress actually approved in the rescission package, and that was $9.4 billion for scope and size.
So you're talking $230+ billion. Sounds like a lot of money. I mean, that's way more than what Illinois spends every year. Not quite as much as California spends every year, but in the grand scheme of the overall federal budget, that's just a drop in the bucket, right?
Right. I mean, it works out to about $1,300 per taxpayer. So there's substantial savings in there if those numbers prove true. We can't totally verify them, but it is the savings. And if the costs were what the government has said they are, and the savings are what they've said they are, the taxpayers did save money from this.
So what about those rebate checks? You said $1,300 per taxpayer. Are we going to see that sometime soon?
No, I don't think so. So even back right when Musk and Trump sort of floated this idea of giving back some of the money, Speaker Johnson broke with both of them very quickly, and he did so at CPAC and said, essentially, we've got to use this money to pay down the debt. So either way, these checks aren't coming now. As you know, Greg, Trump has pivoted to talking about $2,000 taxpayer checks from tariff revenue, although I haven't heard that for months either. So those, I think, are very much in question as well.
So what are public policy researchers saying about the DOGE effort? Because, I mean, listen, whenever it splashed on the scene, it was such a big issue. Everybody was talking about it. And even in states, people were encouraging their state legislators to have some kind of DOGE effort to find waste, fraud, and abuse. But what do the public policy researchers have to say about these?
So I got to two great sources. I talked with David Walker. He ran the GAO. He served as a U.S. Comptroller General for more than a decade. His take was essentially that DOGE grossly overstated how much money they saved, and he also pointed out that only Congress can cut the budget. And that ties back to that $9.4 billion rescission package, which was basically tied to DOGE's findings. So there's real savings there.
Real savings, but I mean, we were told $2 trillion could possibly be carved out of the budget. That's a substantial amount of money. What do you think were some of the problems of getting to that $2 trillion number?
Well, one, I think that Musk really overestimated on what he could save. I mean, in terms of what Congress actually has control over and what the executive branch has control over, those are smaller numbers. So if you look at like total discretionary spending, I mean, he would have been essentially wiping out total discretionary spending for the federal government, which wasn't going to or was unlikely to happen. But when I talked with Edward Lopez, he put it from the Independent Institute. He put it a little differently. He basically said DOGE worked politically, even if there's not verifiable cost savings for taxpayers. So it was a political win. It polled well for Trump. So even without like a legal authority or a final report, it may have done well for Trump's base.
Yeah, I mean, people are still talking about waste, fraud, and abuse. You've got the ongoing investigations that the vice president's leading to go after, like Medicaid fraud and all of the different issues around the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the One Big Beautiful Bill. You know, it's going to cost some states hundreds of millions of dollars if they don't get their overpayments down for SNAP. But what's the White House saying about this? Because, I mean, they came out with a bang talking about the Department of Government Efficiency. What are they saying now?
So that's right. Trump, when he first announced it, he said it was going to be the Manhattan Project of government cost cutting. We were going to
be huge. It's going to be huge.
He did say that repeatedly. I reached out to the White House. Davis Engel basically got back to me. They didn't really answer my questions, but they did say that this was a sign of significant progress. So they defended the concept, but didn't really answer any of my specific questions.
Now, in that hearing last Tuesday you reported on, Vote had this to say.
You all passed many of the reductions that DOGE found just through the normal appropriations process when you ended the year so much lower than the year before. We did some of that in the rescissions package. And so many of the fruits of their labor are sprinkled all across the government, but I'm always happy to work with you on what you feel like you need.
Well, Brett, have DOGE's fruits been sprinkled across the government?
So there's two parts to votes claims that are worth looking at here. One, but only one of them really checks out. The rescission package, the $9.4 billion that Congress, that's real, that's codified, that was real savings. Speaker Johnson's office has tied that money directly to DOGE's findings, but the broader claim of DOGE's cuts essentially didn't really move the needle in terms of debt reduction or reducing taxpayers' costs. But as you mentioned earlier, the DOGE brand really did spread. I mean, mostly Republican states, but about 26 states picked up some form of DOGE or DOGE-like agency. There's a House subcommittee, so this effort isn't totally over, but there are signs that some progress was made, just not nearly as much as DOGE had set out at the beginning, and not nearly as much as I guess probably some would have hoped for.
Yeah, and as the Department of Government Efficiency came to a close July 4th, I'm curious how those DOGE cryptocurrency coins are going to sustain themselves. Brett Rowland with the Center Square, greatly appreciate your reporting on this. We'll talk again soon. The Michigan legislature officially missed its July 1st deadline for the state's fiscal year 26 to 27 budget. But just before the holiday weekend and after marathon sessions in each chamber, almost 10 million people in Michigan now know how their tax dollars will be spent. Wednesday was the statutory deadline for the finalization of Michigan's budget, including the separate school aid budget. This is the second year in a row the state legislature has missed that July deadline. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. Center Square's Elise Apel reports that in April, House Republicans approved a $75.8 billion budget plan. The proposal reduced overall spending by $106 million, and it cut nearly $600 million from the state's general fund while avoiding new taxes and adding to the state's rainy day fund. Now, the Republican plan stood in sharp contrast to the Democrat plan and Governor Gretchen Whitmer's executive budget proposal unveiled earlier in the year. Whitmer's plan totals $88.1 billion, about $10 billion more than the House version, and it includes record K-12 education spending, tax relief for seniors, and additional investments across multiple state programs. Similarly, Democrats in the Senate, they approved an $88.1 billion budget plan in April. Now, flash forward to Friday morning. Senate Bill 878 in Michigan, brought up in the Senate. Here's Democratic State Senator Sarah Anthony explaining that proposed budget proposal.
When these negotiations began, we were facing a budget shortfall of over $1 billion. Yet we made sure that everyday people did not bear the brunt of cruel and ineffective policies from D.C. This budget protects vital government services like Medicaid and food assistance without cutting benefits. What's more, we're continuing to invest in things such as free school meals and pre-K for all, tax credits for seniors and working families, water affordability grants, and affordable housing programs.
Now, Anthony said there's also new money for a plan to help some families.
We created a brand new child care fund to deliver long overdue relief for Michigan's child care providers who work tirelessly to take care of our children and keep the economy humming. With dedicated ongoing funding and a significant deposit to get us started, this fund lays the groundwork to solve one of our most pressing policy problems of the day. For our students in our schools, this budget yet again delivers record per pupil funding. Not only that, for the first time in the state's history, we changed the funding formula to ensure that students who need more support get the help they need.
Not everybody was on board with it. State Senator Jim Runestad, a Republican, he criticized the spending plan that was late because not only was it late, but it was also not very transparent.
Well, I've seen a number of these budget processes over the years, but I think this is the worst ever. I think it's maybe half hour, 40 minutes ago, we caucused to discuss the particulars of this bill, over 1,000 pages, 30 to 40 minutes ago, that we're voting on. Bill after bill after bill. My staff is trying to pull these bills up. We don't have hardly any information trying to read them. They're just coming like this. But we have no idea what's in any of these bills. Bills that we voted on today, this massive 1,000-page monstrosity. Who knows? Not one of the people here know what's in this. This process is absolutely horrendous. This is what I hope we were not going to be doing again. Probably my last budget. And here, this is the worst. It seems like it's getting worse every time.
Now, the budget's ultimately passing out of the Senate moments later. That measure was sent over to the Michigan House. Before ultimately passing Friday morning, Republican State Representative Steve Carra, he said the measure lacks transparency and controls to help bat down the cost to taxpayers.
Here we are at 8:40 in the morning on the last day before the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, prepared to vote on Michigan's budget after being in session for over 20 hours since noon yesterday. Mr. Speaker, before we vote on the largest and arguably most important bill of the year, every member in this chamber should ask themselves one simple question: how can we vote on a budget we have not had time to read? We're talking about over 1,000 pages that direct roughly $80 billion in taxpayer funds. The people from our districts expect us to review, understand, and cast an informed vote on the budget, a massive bill that we have only had 96 minutes to review while finishing voting on 50 other bills.
We talked about $8 million that were in the budget for the arts, a House amendment that prohibited money for illegal aliens being stripped from the final version. He also said not included was the prohibition of funds for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and he criticized prioritizing minority-owned businesses for state government contracts, saying that it's discrimination. It erodes competition and deteriorates the quality of services. Here's Carra wrapping up his comments about the budget.
250 years ago, our founding fathers paved the way for a free and just society, one where government was instituted among men for the purpose of protecting our God-given rights. Their depth of knowledge, wisdom, and courage to establish the greatest nation on God's green earth was nothing short of inspirational. Through the slow and sometimes fast erosion of liberty, our country has drifted away from the intent the founders had for the people. 96 minutes to read this massive budget is an inexplicably inappropriate process for such consequential work.
State Representative Ann Bolin, she praised the budget just before passing, saying that it doesn't eat into the rainy day fund, is smaller than last year, and does not increase taxes or fees.
We also continued our effort to eliminate unnecessary spending by identifying and removing ghost employees from state government. That is good stewardship. But stewardship is about more than just how much we spend. It's also about whether taxpayers can trust that their dollars are being used effectively. That's why this budget places a strong emphasis on accountability. Through HEAT and other good budget reforms, we are bringing greater transparency and accountability to the way government operates and to the way taxpayer dollars are served. That is good stewardship.
Now, Bolin also ensured that there was protection for taxpayers. from abuse of public assistance programs.
We are implementing work requirements sooner for able-bodied adults receiving Medicaid benefits. We are also giving them resources to help them find employment. We are ending self-attestation practices and strengthening eligibility verification standards. We're requiring interstate and federal database checks to help prevent fraud, stop duplicate efforts, and identify instances where benefits may improperly be claimed across multiple states. Still providing opportunities for those who need the benefits to provide them, even if it's temporarily. We are continuing to remove the chip-enabled bridge cards, helping protect SNAP recipients from theft and protecting the taxpayer dollars from organized fraud. We're also establishing regular error rate reviews and reporting requirements so problems can be identified and corrected sooner. These are good accountability measures that help ensure assistance is available for the people these programs were designed to serve, not those who seek to abuse them.
Bolin also said similar standards are going to be applied to child care funding. In Michigan, the fiscal year begins October 1st. Last year, the legislature blew past both the July and October deadlines, not officially passing a budget until October 8th. We'll be sure to get the latest from the team at thecentersquare.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the States. Now it's time for America's Talking with headlines from across the country. You can find it in the description below or in your inbox with the Center Square newsletter, free at thecentersquare.com. Inflation led to roughly $2.7 billion more in Wisconsin's sales tax collections over the past 5 years than was projected. The same amount the state is now projected to have in surplus at the end of its current 2-year budget cycle, according to a new report from the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Center for Research on the Wisconsin Economy. The Center Square reporter John Stife reports the cost of a week's worth of goods in the state has risen 28.1% since 2021. The report says it's clear that prices will not return to 2021 levels. So the only question is whether Wisconsin returns the surplus or uses its ability to lower the state's cost of living. Meanwhile, North Carolina's governor is deciding which bills to sign. 5 bills were presented today. 4 bills got a signature late last week, and 14 more presented on Thursday, all awaiting a decision. The Center Square managing editor Alan Wooten reports included is the state budget. Now, through the weekend, Governor Josh Stein had not given indication on his intent for the state budget. He has chances to change that trend. Monday represents day 1,692 since the state's governor signed a budget, a tenure mainly tied to U.S. Senate candidate and former 2-term Democratic governor Roy Cooper. Saturday wasn't just America's 250th birthday with the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. It also marked the 1-year anniversary of President Donald Trump signing the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which features tax cuts that an Arizona congressman says will mean a huge boost to the state's economy. Democrats have criticized the law, also known as H.R. 1, for its impact on areas such as healthcare and food assistance, but Republicans have pointed to its numerous tax breaks for individuals and small businesses. The Center Square contributor Zachary Schmidt reports U.S. Representative Andy Biggs saying that H.R. 1 has already had a significant impact at the federal level. He pointed to small businesses being able to take advantage of tax cuts. But Biggs said H.R. 1 has not had as much time to take effect in Arizona because the state budget's conforming to the tax cuts wasn't passed until June. And finally, 16 rural hospitals in California, they're at risk of closure, with 5 at risk of closing immediately. That's according to a report from the Center for Healthcare Quality and Payment Reform. The report says California has had 2 rural hospitals close since 2015, The state still has 59 open rural inpatient hospitals, and 22 hospitals have cut or lost services. Many other states are faring much worse than California. The report continues to say that Texas has 84 hospitals at risk of closing, with 26 being at risk of immediate closure. Kansas has 84 hospitals at risk of closure, and 28 are at risk of immediately closing. Center Square, California reporter Madeline Shannon reports notably Utah, Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey have no hospitals at risk of closing, according to the report. And that's just some of what America is talking about. Get these and other headlines at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop, and join us back here Tuesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from all around the country, only with the states. Powered by the Center Square.